my field clothes from the expedition. In fact, this is my towel from the expedition, which is still slightly damp and stained from washing in too many rivers. And I'm going to have to wash my... Oh my word! This smells quite special, and it's still damp with sweat. This is a field t-shirt. I tend to take t-shirts out to Russia to dye. Yeah, that is possibly hazardous waste. Just came back a couple of weeks ago. I was on an expedition to Far East Russia, to Kamchatka, for the best part of 3 months. So we've been out there with a couple of students from the university since the end of June and got back on the 10th of September. Well, the purpose was to survey some forests out there. The forests in Kamchatka are fantastic because they're generally untouched by humans, and you get these vast expanses covered in trees, and so we were trying to look at natural forest processes in an area where we could rely upon them not having been damaged too greatly. For the greater part of it we were staying out in the forest, camping, and every day we'd head out and go and measure trees. Well, what we'd do would be to set out a grid of poles at 10-metre intervals, and we'd use those poles to map the forest. So setting out the poles itself takes a good day's work with compasses and with trying to get everything aligned, and then several days would be spent mapping all the individual trees. At the same time we'd also be collecting information about the flowers that were growing underneath the trees. We had one of the students was trapping small mammals at the same time and collecting information about the tracks and the signs that you could see around the plots. We also had another lad who was collecting insects, particularly hoverflies that were pollinating the flowers. And also for some of the time we were joined by an ornithologist who took pictures of and collected records of the birds that were around the plots. So we got to learn quite a lot about what was going on in each of these patches of forest that we studied. The mix of species is unusual. In fact, there's no forest quite like the Kamchatkan forests that I know anywhere else in the world. And also the fact that there's so few people there means that you can rely upon them being natural, old-growth forests that really haven't been disturbed too much since the last ice age. This is our data books that we collected. Now, it doesn't look particularly impressive that we went away for 3 months and this is what came back, but this is gold dust, and all the way through this we have records of, these are the positions of trees within the plots. We also have information about the different heights of the trees, information about the different species of flowers that were present in the understory. Well, hopefully I intend to get a few academic papers published out of this, which should give us some insights into how these forests are structured and how everything fits together. But this phase is actually more time consuming than many people realise. There's going to be at least 6 months to enter it, to analyse it, to write the papers. It'll be a year before anything's seen in print. We collected quite a few biological samples. We collected soil from all the plots, and actually we've got a student in the lab already who's analysing the soils and trying to understand what the differences are between the different forest types in those terms. These are soil samples that I collected while I was out in Russia that are now being analysed in the laboratory. How can you tell what's what? Because I labelled each one with the plot it was collected in, which part of the plot, and the date I took it. So they all look very much the same, but they're actually from completely different areas. Well, along with a collaborator in environmental sciences, Sophie, we're looking at nutrient mineralisation rates, overall nutrient content and soil respiration. Just to learn a bit more about what's going on underground in the plots, is that you take a soil corer, which looks like 2 pieces of pipe welded together, which it is, and you clear away some of the leaves, stick this in the ground, pull it out, and you get a core of soil. This is just my own personal journal that I fill in on a daily basis. Some of it's personal observations, some of it's records of the vegetation that I've seen and any particularly interesting things that I've spotted. We raced over to the park HQ in the morning drizzle, and for the last few days it's been misty and grey at the beginning, so we were still hopeful that it would clear later on. After the usual delays organising everything, we soon found ourselves bouncing towards the Kardon encampment in the van, which ploughed straight through the Ulavkavchan river on the way. Breakfast didn't settle well with that kind of transport, and Kim was badly travel sick by the time we got there. Once we were ensconced in our quarters, Tim and I decided to head up to the White Birch Forest to try and place a marker for the plot. Kim stayed back to recover. We then returned for an early lunch and found Sergei, the local warden, who was wonderfully hospitable and had spent most of the morning drinking tea, while we unfortunately had trudged through the wet forests. He'd warned us about a local bear that apparently ate his dog recently. And although we'd seen a few bear scrapes near the plot, there weren't any particularly disturbing activity signs. After lunch I was already wrecked, but we had no choice but to go out and work and use the good weather. I prepared some stakes for the plot while the others went and set the baselines and then got lost on their way back to find me. Not sure how that was possible. It was a clear slope and it was only a few hundred metres away, but it meant we lost quite a lot of time before we managed to move the stakes up and then get them set up. The lines had to go through several dense patches of mountain pine, all of which added to the chore of it. So it was past 7 o'clock before we finished, and eventually we sloped back to the Cardon to sleep.